Welcome to another Boys to Dads podcast. I'm your host, Big Country.
I'm Coach B. What's poppin'? What's going on, world?
Oh, this is going to be a fun episode. We're, I heard a whole bunch of other people doing this, and I love music. I love hip hop.
Hey, don't front. We just want to jump on the bandwagon too.
Yep. But this is close to my heart.
Yes.
We're going to do the hip hop at 50. Right, hip hop at 50. We're going to talk about a couple things, some influences. We're going to also go through a couple lists and see if people got it right or if people messed it up.
It's funny because when we was going over the list the other day when I was cutting your hair, and I was like, whoever did that list needs to be shot.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. Yes. And we're not really saying shot like go kill someone. We are saying that if you're going to write something, you better know what the hell you're talking about.
Bottom line.
Because some of this stuff, man, I was looking this up. I'm like, you guys are garbage. But I know at the same time, it's only perspective, right?
Everybody has an opinion. We don't have to agree with it.
Yep. And I definitely don't agree with some of this.
We had a lot of disagreements on some people's lists.
Yeah, so we're going to go through Complex's top 50 hip-hop artists from New York.
Ooh.
We're going to discuss how certain people were left higher and lower, like Ice Spice. No disrespect to her, but Jesus.
Wait, let me time out for a second. When your nephew John kept saying Ice Spice, what was my reaction? Who is that?
Who is it? Yeah, and I generally keep up with new artists and stuff like that. I'm getting to that age, though, where old school rules more. More of my playlist is 90s and early 2000s hip hop. But come on, man, we gotta do better. And then we always like to start out the podcast. If you have any information, you want to hit us up at Boys to Dads Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. We do have a TikTok account that's coming soon. With more uploads, try to be more inventive with certain things. You can always email us at, boys to dads podcast at gmail.com. If you have any information, you want to be a guest on the show, we'd love to have you. As always, thank you for listening. 45, but my voice is still cracking. It's unbelievable. So, let's get on to this because it's going to take a little bit, and we want to keep our podcast at about 40 minutes, so that you got enough time to listen, so you don't have to go back 3 days later and try to finish something off, so you can get the message.
This is get bored with us.
And we don't want that. We want to have good content. Obviously, due to content rules, I can't just play the songs that we're going to talk about. I can't really. We can sing a little bit because it's going to be my rendition. You guys will probably turn it off after that, anyways.
Exactly.
But if you know me, you know hip hop is part of my DNA.
It's part of my DNA because I was there from the beginning.
Yeah, Queens get the money. Long time no.
I was there from the beginning.
Yeah. Yes. So for me, I always had a love of music. I'll set this up real quick. My father used to, he plays the drums, he plays the guitar. So, it wasn't nothing to come in one day and hear Pink Floyd, and the next minute hear Herbie Hancock, and the next minute hear Earth, Wind & Fire, and the next minute hear Anita Baker, and the next minute hear Phil Collins, and then Philip Bailey from Earth, Wind & Fire, and Genesis, and so I got this eclectic version, Michael Jackson.
It's funny you say that because whenever I hopped in my pop's car, one of those artists was always playing.
Yeah, and Michael Jackson was huge, especially growing up, 70s baby going into the 80s, like the Jackson 5, Michael Jackson. So, and my father loved jazz and he loved rock music. And so when hip hop first came out, we was always argue because I remember listening to like Run DMC. And I remember Run DMC and LL were like the first two real hip hop artists I heard, right? That, because back in the day, especially living in Connecticut, unlike New York, and I know New York, you still had to wait until like 9 o'clock at night, WBLS, DJ Red Alert, or Bobito and Stretch if you got that
Mr.
radio.
Magic.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I know you had to wait, because hip hop wasn't,
wasn't mainstream
and nobody took it seriously. But I remember like transitioning. I heard LL Cool J, I'm Bad, Can't Live Without My Radio, and then I heard like Walk This Way and My Adidas and Mary, Why You Bugging? And I remember hearing Run DMC, and I was like, I like this. And then I remember hearing NWA, and a white kid, from Connecticut was like, I relate to them. And it wasn't necessarily relate to them in the sense of like, obviously what they were going to do in South Central and stuff, but relate to them in the sense of like, why are people always messing with me?
Yep.
you know, then you hear DJ Jazzy Jeff, Fresh Prince, and you hear like parents just don't understand. You're like, they don't.
Exactly.
They don't. Damn it, you're right.
Yep. And what kid that you know, basically, when Parents Just Don't Understand came out, that before every school year, that was the narrative.
Yep. Parents just don't understand. Oh, he's picking out my clothes.
That's
like I don't
the narrative. Yep.
And then, you know, as you get further and further into the 80s, hearing Big Daddy Kane, you know, Smooth Operator, and you hear EPMD, and then you hear Cool G Rap, My Demo, in the streets of New York, Eric B. and Rakim, and then all of a sudden you start to hear this like golden age of hip hop, but the lyrics started getting better and better. And I remember like Cool G Rap, I always had his tape. I always had Eric B. and Rakim, like just hearing it, like Don't Sweat the Technique, Big Daddy Kane, Smooth Operator. I remember, you know, So What You Saying, EPMD.
Yes.
And you get like 90, 91, and you start to hear like Black Sheep, Engine, Number, and then De La Soul.
Nas.
I remember hearing De La Soul and being like, yo, it's kind of hot. And then watching Yo MTV Raps, because that starts to come out. And
please, you got Yo MTV Rap. What about when we grew up in New York? Video Music Box.
Oh,
I know you New Yorkers out there know about that.
I knew that.
Man, Ralph McDaniels.
And so it was just crazy to like, you know, because it was still, like, hip-hop was still kind of, even though it started to become mainstream after, like, Walk This Way, but it still was underground. And then, like, I remember Columbia, the tapes where you could buy the tapes, they give you like 10 tapes for free, but
like
then you had
penny?
Yeah, and then they're like,
I still owe them money.
We all owe them money. That's why they went out of business. And I remember getting Boogie Down Productions.
Ooh.
And the one where KRS-One's got the Mac 10 and he's looking around the corner. Yo, you're a philosopher. That like when I heard that, I was like, I'm sold. Like just the stuff that they were talking about. And then, you know, Ice Cube, like when NWA broke up with Ice Cube, like Jacking for Beats and you know, No Vaseline, like oh my God. And then like, you know, just.
Or even with Dr. Dre when he dropped the Chronic. Oh,
game changer.
Ooh.
I remember the first time I heard I Could Feel It, boom, 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 and then I heard Snoop. I was like, yo, who is this dude? Because he's got that smooth, like I remember the first time, and so I grew up on hip hop, and I remember arguing with my dad. He was like, it's not music. They're taking other people's music and making it their own. But I'm like, Dad, think about it. Like they're not taking other people.
Sonic rapper about that one time.
Yeah, but I'm like, you know, they didn't take the words they're saying from other people. Like this is and it was an insight into a world that I knew 2% about. And just growing up and feeling like I remember the first time I heard It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. I was like, yo, whoever this dude is, he's brilliant. And I learned like some of it. I learned Black history. Like being a white kid, like you learn. Like, wait a minute, what do you mean? Because you know, like when you're like 12 years old, you know, people talk about slavery, but you don't really know about but then you hear like 911 is a joke, and you're like, why does it take them 20 minutes to get to a gunshot victim? It took them 2 minutes to get to my house.
I'm not even gonna lie. First time I heard You Must Learn by KRS-One, that's the first time I ever opened up a Bible after that. Yeah,
like it's so you know, for all those people talking about the influence negatively, I always say like for me, it made. And here's the thing about hip hop that I don't think people understand. I remember doing this to you that day with what was it, with Ghostface, and ain't no love to be found. Don't. And I was like, yo, you want to hear the real song? And I played it, and you were like, yo, who the hell is that? And I was like, yo, this is the original song. They took the beat from it. Hip hop is also a living history of music. Because it takes, like, Ghostface, you know, RZA and all them, they would take Al Green's beat from here, and this beat from here, and this beat from here.
A horn play from this one, drum set from
and
this
you start one. And then you go back and you start to, as you get a little bit older, you start to appreciate music in general, and you start listening to old school R&B, old school funk, you know, like Doggy Dog. And then you start to realize, wait a minute, Atomic Dog? Yo, that was that was a Snoop Dogg's.
Yep, because I was just getting ready to say that. I knew of, whatchamacallit, the P-Funk sound and everything like that, but I really appreciated it when Snoop came out.
Oh, yeah. When and Snoop came out, like Delphonics and Ghostface.
And Dre would use the, oh my God, like the first time I knew like somebody used auto-tunes, You know what I'm saying? What's his name first? When he was big on that, what was his name?
Roger Troutman.
That's that. Yes,
Roger Troutman.
Roger Troutman. Yes, yes. But when
Computer Love.
yes, yes, it was like, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
They had auto-tune back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And I heard Roger Troutman on Keith Sweat's song, "Put Your Love to the Test." Yep. And I was like, who's this? And then I started connecting dots. I'm like, hold up, in the Wood, because remember, Computer Love was in the Wood. And then I'm like, yo, this soundtrack, Computer Love, who did? I'm like, hold up, Zapp. What do you mean Zapp? And all of a sudden you look back, you're like, wait a minute. Or like when you realize that Charlie Wilson was in the Gap Band, and you like, that's Charlie. Hold up, that's Charlie Wilson. So like, a lot of times when you go backwards, you start to realize like, could you imagine being a producer, somebody that hears a horn here, a drum snare here? And they're like, yo, if you put this together, this is what we have. And all of a sudden you take 3 records and then you put your own little spin on it. And then you give them the respect and the copyright stuff. And then all of a sudden you got this amazing sound. Or like you listen to, you know, when you go further, you start to get into like Bad Boy.
Yeah.
And the music that they use, like, you know, when Biggie's like, it was all a dream. I used to be, you know, and all of a sudden you hear Juicy.
Yep.
And you're like, wait a minute. Oh, that's where they got it from. Yeah,
yes.
And you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's where you got it from. And then, and so you start to like appreciate the ear and how, you know, just like a jazz person tunes their trumpet and plays and experiments with certain sounds to get to the sound that they want. That's what the hip hop producer is doing to get that right sound.
Yep.
And that's what I love so much about this past season of Wu-Tang American Saga.
Yes.
Was seeing and even the season before, seeing the process and like him kind of going, hey, hold on, wait a minute, slow it down, play it up, hold on, no, that don't sound right. I'm not getting the right sound. And you know what you want to hear, you're just trying to figure out how to get to that point.
Yep.
And I thought that was brilliant from a position of people, you know, just, it's almost like when we talk about sports and people see the finished product, like Steph shooting from 40 feet and making 45% of his shots from 3, and you don't realize the process that went in.
Thousands of shots he took to get to that point. Yeah.
So it's like the same thing with the producer. And so I used to argue with my dad, and then one day I played the Roots for him. And I'm like, Dad, what do you hear there? He goes, well, this sounds real. This sounds like real music. You could tell like that's not it. And he comes down, but what's crazy is like I had to respect him enough in his perspective because I never understood what he meant. He was a drummer. So one day he brought me down and he goes, play these songs for me. And so I played him all these hip hop songs like and he goes, look, it's the same damn cadence. And he's just looked bored. And he goes, now put on Pink Floyd or put on Genesis. You know, or put on an old school like Moody Blues or Yes or something like, you know, or he was like put on Herbie Hancock, and all of a sudden he starts playing and it starts like then I was and then like the amount of work being put in, and you start to realize, man. And then he put that on into me, and then he goes, now listen to the Roots. And you listen to Roots, and it's like doom doom, and most of it, but then it's like doom doom, doom doom, doom, and then all of a sudden you're adding more into it. So he's like, you could tell there's a difference between live, a band, and then just some guy hitting on the MPC and the 808 and just going, right, and then programming it, and then going back and adding. And then, you know, like the grinding beat, like that, like, you know what I'm saying? It's like that's what you see kids at the lunch table when they're freestyling. It's like, and it's like, give me a beat. And so it's like, he's like, yeah, it's creativity, but music. And I was like, yeah, but you're a music like perfectionist, but you don't realize that music is creative. It's an art form. And here we are 50 years later. With an art form,
I don't care if it's put 50 years down the line, you can state this because we be the old school artists. I keep thinking about that lyric all the time. All the time. I keep